Hi guys, and welcome to the second episode of Get That Tone. This series is designed to help you guys achieve the guitar tones from some of our favourite records as recommended by you. In today's episode we're looking at Hysteria by Muse, specifically trying to recreate the tone that Matt Bellamy achieved on the Absolution record and the Absolution tour in 2003. The way the format for these work is we first of all jump into the performance, play the song through in its entirety, then we talk about the history and a gear breakdown of what Matt used on the album and the tour, and then finally I show you how I recreated the tone using the Kemper Profiling Amplifier. If at any point you want to flick to a specific section, all the time codes are down in the description below, so you can just skip a section and get to the thing you want to. So I just want to let you guys know that if you want to find the specifics of all the parameters that I used on the Kemper and how I set it up, you can head over to my Patreon, and just for $4, or it would be £3 something in my case over here in the UK, you get a whole range of pre-production video content. You get a load of photos of the storyboards for each episode, all of the planning, all the lists and research that I put together. So you guys get a much clearer understanding of things, of all the stuff that you guys haven't had the opportunity to see and learn about in this video. On that note, I want to say thank you that everyone has joined as a patron to support me, and I hope you enjoyed the content from the last episode based on Andy Summers from The Police. So without further ado guys, let's jump into the performance and go from there. So in 2003, on the touring cycle for the Absolution record, the Absolution Tour, Matt Bellamy used a range of specific gear. It's widely known that Matt's a huge fan of Manson guitars, made by George Manson over here in the UK, often playing his Telecaster with the Chaos pad built into the body. In terms of amplifiers, he used a Diesel VH4, 2 of them. It's also widely known that he's a huge fan of the Zivec Fuzz Factory, possibly what could have been used in the studio to help recreate that fuzz, crazy, chaotic, overtone series tone that you get in the track Hysteria. Whether he used the exact same pedal on the tour, I'm not entirely sure, or whether he didn't want to tour it. Instead, what I do know he used is a range of Line 6 rack unit gear and being controlled by a MIDI expression board. Specifically, the Line 6 rack gear he used were the Echo Pro, the Mod Pro, the Pod Pro and the XT Pod Pro. This probably gave him some of the modulation, phaser, flanging and just general modulation effects that you hear in this track. So whether the Line 6 rack gear was used on the studio version, I'm not entirely sure, but it was most definitely likely used in the live scenario to help them achieve the wide range of tones. The distortion sound could perhaps not necessarily be a Zivec Fuzz Factory, but in fact a fuzz preset on one of the Line 6 units, perhaps the Pod Pro. Nonetheless, what's important to know when trying to recreate this tone is the effects that he's using. To my ear, it definitely sounds like there's a phaser, a flanger and maybe some sort of rotary speaker involved. There's quite clearly a fuzz. Whether he's using the fuzz from the Pod Pro interacting with the Diesel VH4, I'm not entirely sure. But this is what I used in this context in order to help me create the chaotic sound that I believe a Zivec Fuzz Factory allows you to achieve. So to switch between all of the Line 6 presets on the rack units that he used, Matt used a Rocktron All Access unit. So Paul English, Matt Bellamy's guitar tech at the time, stated that all the settings are changed by MIDI using the Rocktron All Access, and we use an immense amount of MIDI channels for Matt's setup alone. There are many patches within the channels, so if you're on channel 30, which is Hysteria, within it there are 15 different patches. So without further ado guys, let's dive into how I emulated these sounds using the Kemper Profiling Amplifier. Hi guys, and welcome to the section where we break down the guitar tones that I used in that performance using the Kemper Profiling Amplifier. So there's 5 main patches that I've programmed into the Kemper in order to replicate each of the parts from the record. They are as follows. The first guitar patch for the main guitar riff. The second guitar patch is for the chorus. The third patch is for the verse, the second verse, where Matt Bellamy doubles up on the bass line on guitar. The fourth patch is the patch for the guitar solo. And last but not least, the fifth and final patch is the patch that's used in the outro, that big guitar breakdown riff at the end of the song. So, heading back to the first patch, as I explained before, Matt uses the Diesel VH4 amplifier, and he's a huge advocate and fan of the Zivec Fuzz Factory. So, in order to achieve this tone, I did obviously none other than I used a Diesel VH4 profile. So I'm using a Diesel VH4 profile, and I'm actually putting a fuzz on top of that. The profile is quite driven, so without everything on it so far now, this is how it sounds. This is the profile on its own. It's more of kind of just on the edge of breakup really. The next thing I engaged was the compressor and the reverb. I always use reverb. The fuzz itself, which gives you the main bulk of the tone here. We're in fact using an octave here. So we should have an octave below and an octave above as well. But mild, not overtaking things. And then finally, the last thing we have is a noise gate. to eliminate any hissing. Over in the effects section, the first thing I engage is a stereo widener. The magic secret, we're using a phaser here. A phaser to kind of create the sound that on the record, a combination of the fuzz, which may be the Zvex Fuzz Factory in front of a diesel VH4, or in fact maybe a Vox 8030, as I know Matt Bellamy is a big fan of that amplifier. However, the diesel is definitely what was used in 2003 on the Absolution tour. So the phaser in conjunction with the fuzz gives you this kind of sound. And again, the phaser isn't too heavy because we don't really want it to be a bit too insane, especially when the guitars are double tracked. The fuzz in conjunction with that profile at breakup kind of gives you that chaotic fuzz that you're looking for anyway. Now obviously the first thing that we play in the intro is the guitar slide, the pick scrape slide. So there needs to be something in order to help that pick slide a little bit better, makes that sound a little bit better. And specifically that's what the phaser is for, but also delay. So if I was to do the pick slide without any delay or phaser on it, it sounds quite feeble. Not really what we're looking for. So in conjunction with the phaser, a delay immediately makes it a little bit more atmospheric. It just gives it a much more bigger, rounder, slightly more aggressive tone, which is what we're looking for. And then you get into the riff. Heading over to the chorus, the patch here is a lot more simple. It needed to differ from the patch used in the main riff in the sense that we didn't want something quite as chaotic and quite as fuzzy. So here we're using a VH4 profile again on the third channel of the amplifier with it really driven in order to create that kind of distorted fuzz sound without actually using a fuzz. The reason for this is I wanted a little bit more clarity. In the original recordings there's a lot of layers, but in order to create the effect, the impact that we're trying to create from the actual track itself, we definitely want that main riff to be as big as it can be in comparison to the chorus. The chorus is still big, but particularly a huge part of this is actually Matt's vocal layers in there as well on the original recording. So the chorus sound itself is just a compressor and a very driven VH4 with reverb and the stereo widener just like before. Moving over to the third patch, here is where things change a little. It's exactly the same patch that we had at the start in patch 1 that we used for the riff. However, what we're doing here is we're adding in the effects loop, rather than using the stereo widener, we're now using an EQ. So we're taking out all of the low frequencies, quite a lot of them, pretty much all of the mids as well, so that we end up with a really thin sound that sits on top of the bass guitar. If you go and listen to the recording or listen to the album, what you'll hear is in verse 2, Matt doubles up on the bass line, but it doesn't have all the low end and all the thickness from the guitar tone in the original riff with the fuzz. This is also taken up by the bass itself. The bass, the pedal that was used on the bass is actually a really rare pedal, and it just gives it this really fat, warm low end, so we don't need to worry about the guitar in the second verse doing this for us. Finally, when we do get to the solo section, this is quite a not completely articulate tone, but it's definitely gives you enough punch because we're still using the fuzz. This is the patch we used for the main guitar riff. However, now the EQ is set differently. We've backed off from the bass in order to make sure that it's not getting in the way of the bass when we're doing the solo. We've still got our phaser on it. We've still got our stereo widener. However, now we have two things that make quite a significant difference. A bit shaper and a delay. The bit shaper is in the mod section, and the delay is in the delay section of the effects stomp section of the Kemper. The reason for using the bit crusher, or the bit shaper here, is because we want to create that kind of chaotic sound, that the uncontrollable, unpredictable sound of a Zvec fuzz factory, the kind of overtone series, the harmonics that you get from that. So using the bit crusher in conjunction with the fuzz and the slightly distorted profile, I believed allowed me to create that chaotic overtone that you hear in the tone. With the delay, quite a wide delay, quite a lot of delay in the mix here, but we're also making sure that our pick attack is strong enough that we can still hear what's going on. So I've increased the pick attack a bit on the amplifier section of the Kemper. Quite a lot of repeats here. You'll hear that it's quite a rhythmic delay. Ba, 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 ba. Which also helps create the rhythmic kind of chaos that I'm looking for when it comes to that solo tone. So last but not least, heading over to that outro section guitar patch, patch number 5. Here it's the same patch that we've used in the main guitar riff. However, we're changing one significant thing here. Rather than using a phaser, which you can use, I've definitely played this before live with a phaser, and also using a wah, cocking it backwards and forwards to help create some sort of filtered sound. If you listen to the album recording or you listen to the record, what there most definitely is some sort of either flanger or rotary speaker, something that sounds like it's rising and dropping. When I used a rotary speaker or Leslie emulation on the Kemper, it didn't quite give me the sound I wanted in order to replicate the sound that I heard in my head, which I felt was as close to the tone on the album as possible. Using a phaser definitely worked, but for this specific video, and when I was trying to put the tones together and putting a lot of research for this together, I felt that using a flanger in the mod section and the reverb and the stereo widener still gave me the sound I was looking for. So if I just play one note for you, you'll hear how the flanger is reacting with that fuzz and with the distorted VH4 profile. In conjunction with the bass guitar at this point playing the same riff, we're now doing a unison line, and the drums which are really just smashing out, and there's a 4 on the floor, 4 to the floor, a kick drum eventually at the end of it. All of that coupled with this tone and the flanger gives you that awesome descending breakdown that just makes you want to headbang. Also, one thing to mention when it comes to the end of that, where the 4 to the floor kick drum comes in, I actually move my picking hand further back so it helps cut it a bit more. So there you go guys, that's all 5 patches. If you want to get the specifics on the Kemper details, if you want to get my EQ settings, you want to get each of the parameters for all of the effects, stomp boxes, you can go over to my Patreon and please support me there. I'm so grateful for some of you that have already supported me in the last video. I think I got £7 or something in total, which actually went towards buying a load of plectrums, which I'm putting together for a video that's coming out soon, talking about why there's different plectrums, why there's different thicknesses, and how they can be used in a session performance and creating certain tones context. So yeah, if you haven't already guys, please go over there. There's loads of pre-production videos, there's loads of post-production videos there as well, just loads of extra content that allows you guys to understand what's happening. I also post stuff there before these actually come out. So it's a way of seeing this episode or seeing the performance itself before anyone actually sees this air on YouTube. So guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next episode.